Okay. Hi. I would like you to introduce yourself. Could you say your name and some of your background?
Okay, well, my name is Damion Todd II. I am a senior political science major on a pre-law track from Detroit, Michigan, and I attend Hampton University.
Okay. And what is your ethnic background?
So I am African American.
Okay. And can you talk some about your experiences and as an African American and African American identity?
So growing up as an African American in the inner city of Detroit, Michigan, I would say that I had pretty similar experiences to those who I lived around. I attended schools downtown for most of my life. And through that, I was pretty much around a lot of the same people. So the same struggles and ideologies we kind of shared. Some core things as far as like education. I've always pretty much excelled in my studies, but when I got to about seventh grade, my teachers, they began to realize that I was kind of moving at a faster pace than my peers. So through that, they recommended some different schools, and those happened to be schools where they were a lot more diverse. Where as growing up, like I mentioned before, I never went to all of the people who I attended school with were the same, like had the same background as me, like literally everyone outside of the teachers and maybe principals and things like that. But when I switched schools after seventh grade, I ended up going to a school that was a lot more diverse, where I actually became a minority. And through that was a major adjustment for me. But on one hand, it made me embrace my culture more, but on the other hand, it also just opened my eyes to how other people lived and how other people viewed things. And that was a pretty transformative experience for me. So that pretty much made up a lot of the decisions that I make today and who I am today. Just that switch, just seeing something different than what I was accustomed to.
Okay. So what was that experience like, being in a different school where you were actually a minority? How was that?
So at first, honestly, it was hard because just as far as like what conversations and studies were centered around, they switched from growing up, like some of the studies still had somewhat of a Eurocentric view, but I felt like there especially, also with it being a Catholic school, there was a like Eurocentric view, and some conversations they couldn't be had just because of
The religious dimension?
Yeah, the religious dimension as well as like just comfortability, whereas you could say something and you're maybe the only African American person in the class, and it's like you'll know or you'll have a feeling that no one will agree with you. So it's like instead you just don't say anything. Like,
that often happens.
Yeah.
So was that difficult to hold some things inside?
Definitely, yeah. And also during that time, that was so when I first got there, really I was adjusting to it academically. But after that, that was around the time where Trump was running for president and things were beginning to switch over. So it was like on one hand, I was feeling like uncomfortable to talk about certain things, whereas a lot of my counterparts who I went to school with, just with how Trump was kind of with his, how he kind of voiced his opinion on things, my classmates felt even more comfortable to say things that may have like offended me or made me feel away. So it's like, on one hand, I didn't feel comfortable to speak my opinion, whereas my counterparts felt more comfortable to voice theirs, whether it was the right or wrong thing.
Do you think when you did have the courage to speak up, did you speak up sometimes, and did some people listen to you?
So yes, my school, we tried to do our best as students, like as a minority at the school, me and some of my friends who had similar backgrounds and like just switched over to the school, we got involved in different programs that our school had, like the base program for like Black students, and through there we kind of got to voice our opinions, be comfortable with each other and things like that. And those type, like the events that we had, it kind of transferred over to some of our classes where, you know, we made events that were catered not only to the Black students but to all students, so where they could still hear our perspective and begin to like get a different perspective. Whereas
did some students appreciate that?
Yeah, a lot of students actually appreciated that. Despite their different backgrounds and different ideologies. So through that, there became a mutual respect began to grow between us, even if we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on everything.
On some things.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So then I have a lot of questions for you, but how was it to live, because I wasn't in the U.S. during the Trump period, but I can imagine what it was like as an African American and going through all of that during that time period, and like what was going on with Black Lives Matter and all of these other issues.
So that was just an interesting time. I remember it. It was about like 10th grade, if I remember correctly. When everything began to like first pop off, and that was just interesting to me only because, as I mentioned before, like certain opinions that my counterparts oftentimes like kept to themselves or like kept amongst themselves, they felt more comfortable to voice it just because that's what Trump was doing. Like, just saying like the first thing that may have came to his head. So, I felt like they were more inclined to like make us feel like uncomfortable towards certain conversations or certain things, or they may bring up things and kind of like side eye you in class, or like they may say something that may be like offensive and they may not even realize it, but they could say it, and then everyone in the class just like looks toward like the couple Black people that are in the room, like just trying to see like just getting
what would happen,
our like reactions, like
right.
Whereas like sometimes we won't say anything, but you know, just with our facial expressions or like reactions to it, like
they know
they begin to like look for those things or kind of like instigate those.
Oh, even instigate.
Yeah, because sometimes I don't know. I learned pretty quickly that like I can't take offense to everything that like people from different backgrounds than me say, just because a lot of times they just don't understand, or they don't even know that they're doing something wrong or saying something.
And I agree with you about that, because like in my experience in China, being a minority in China for 8 years, and with my wife too, and we constantly, people be looking at us and, you know, taking pictures of us and silly things and you know, expecting certain things, but it happened continually for 8 years. So I understand. So you had to kind of like just kind of sometimes deal with it and not necessarily always be judgmental about it,
right,
unless the person is really a jerk or something like. What about also growing up in Detroit, and you said mainly in the Black community, and can you say something about like were there struggles that you had also, and was it what was going on, what type of
So as far as struggle, I would say that I didn't experience it as much as some of the people that I lived around, and I'm fortunate for that, because you know my mom, she's provided like a lot for me and done a lot for me, to where I would say that we grew up in like pretty much the middle class. So,
okay. So
yeah,
you were more in middle class neighborhoods as opposed to.
Well, Not necessarily. It was like some of the people that I lived around, I would say that they probably weren't middle class. But
okay.
we happened to be like middle class, and to where it was like we could enjoy like certain things that the people around us
couldn't always.
Yeah. So in that aspect, as far as struggle, it wasn't too bad for me. Like maybe like growing up between like. Between being firstborn and maybe to like, I would say like 5 or 7, it was like the struggle was more like apparent, but it was just something that I didn't really realize because my mom made sure that I had everything that I needed, and my family like
took care of you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. So.
So you were fortunate in that sense. Yeah.
Definitely. Whereas like some of my closest friends, like they didn't have that same. They didn't have that same blessing in that sense. So it's like I still could relate just because I was around it a lot, but day to day it wasn't as strong. I'll admit that. So.
Oh, that's good. So you had kind of like positive role models in a lot of ways that helped shape you during your childhood, and some people didn't have that as much, right?
Exactly.
Right. And what do you think, like, what is it like in Detroit? Like, growing up in Detroit, I mean, I think, I can only just, I just think of, like, Eminem. I don't know why. Just remembering that didn't he grow up in Detroit too as well? But, I mean, Detroit is, what aspects of African American culture are in Detroit? And are there some things that are unique to Detroit?
So, I would say that Detroit, as far as in the African American community,
could you tell me something about African American culture in Detroit?
Okay, so honestly, I would say that Detroit is one of the hearts of African American culture, and I say that because once the big three, like GMC, Chrysler, and Ford, like once those plants all like start being built in cities like Detroit, it was people like African Americans from all over, especially down south, who came to places like Detroit and found jobs and things like that. So like a lot of my family, they work like at one of the plants, and I just know a lot of people that work there. But it's just like, it sort of became like, not a melting pot, but it became a hub for African Americans to come there. And then there's also things that are key to African American culture, like Motown, for example, that started in Detroit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so so yeah, it's just a few essential things that are key to like African American culture that make Detroit one of the hardest of.
Okay, that's interesting. And what aspects do you think you identify with in African American culture?
So I would say just my upbringing. It's similar to a lot of other people who grew up there. They're like big on the same like type of music, and then kind of like just the shared experiences of like our parents, like where a lot of us have family that are like from, like they go back to like Alabama, like places like Alabama, Georgia, things
that's
like
interesting.
that. Yeah, so it's like we, like a lot of us have family there, but like we reestablished our families in like Detroit. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's pretty common, I would say.
Right. Was that like in the 1920s, like during the Harlem Renaissance? Was that like part of the Great Migration from like moving from the South to?
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I would say, like around that time. Yeah.
So do you think how do you think that changed African American culture from like the South? Because some students were saying, and it was in a different class, but they were basically just saying like they feel like the heart of African American culture is in the South. That's what some students were saying.
I would say that the people before me I would say they had better opportunities after moving like to places like Detroit, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that because it was easier for them to find work where you can, not necessarily. It was still harder to move up in the ranks, no matter what field you're in, but it was just a better opportunity for better life, and that's why a lot of people flock to those cities.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say that was very important for our culture, for us to, unfortunately, move away from the South.
Yeah, that's true, because there's a little uprooting as well.
Exactly.
Do you what kind of music do you identify with now in terms of African American music? What kind of music would you listen to now?
I would say a lot of music. I grew up on a lot of the music that came from the Motown era, when it was big.
So you listen to some of the old music?
Yeah,
oh,
definitely. And it's I don't know. That's just second nature. Honestly.
Oh, that's interesting.
So a lot of that music that I grew up on and heard a lot, it's sampled and reused in music today, in different genres like R&B and hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
But those are some of the classics that
Do you think that there's been an evolution towards more commercialization of African American culture since that time period?
Yeah, I definitely say so, because whether it's politically correct or not, I would say that genres like hip hop are credited to African American culture. It's always linked to it, even though it's not exclusive to African Americans or African American culture.
But it started in African American culture.
Exactly. So
when I was young, I used to break dance. So I can show you some of those videos and everything. But that was a different time frame,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before you were born and everything. But I mean, I really learned it more from the African American community. But I developed my own style within. Mm-hmm. But it was from the African American community, but still interacting. And I think it was a kind of positive thing, on the streets, something the dance was creative and everything. And it's when compared to today, it's good, but I still feel some of that positive thing from the streets, I don't think it lasted as much sometimes, as around today, everything seems more commercial in a sense.
Definitely,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also it's just unfortunately, just a lot of the topics that are covered in mainstream hip hop, they're linked to, I would say, negative things in society, which contributes to negative stereotypes.
Right.
Our culture.
And then actually the real thing was, at the beginning, was more positive. There was people trying to create something positive for themselves when they didn't have it as much. That's what I think. And then it became more commercial and that kind of. But also, I was wondering about the African American church. How do you feel about that in terms of African American music? How do you think the African American church influenced music?
I would say, well, I'm a Baptist Christian. I attend I can't even say predominantly black, is all black, honestly.
Oh, okay.
The congregation is all black.
Honestly.
Okay. And I would say, as far as music,
because I had some students before, I play the piano, and I can read music and everything, but I was learning to improvise with jazz. But then, some of my students could improvise, but they couldn't do music. So it was really interesting. But I felt if you look at a lot of people talk about the spirituals and the blues and the work songs and then jazz, and then jazz also came from European as well as African American, kind of mixed together, and then rhythm and blues and even country and everything. But a lot of times it seems like leave out the part of the gospel from the church. And
Oh, yeah.
I was listening to some over when the pandemic was going on. I was in China, and I was listening to. I was learning more to how to improvise better
Mm-hmm.
from an African American pianist who was making all the YouTube videos on that, and was just showing how to improvise in so many different ways. And then it just really felt like, wow, like you look at gospel, it has so much spirit and something.
Influence.
Yeah. So what do you think about like gospel?
I would say that it has a lot of influence on like the music that we've been listening to. I would say that it's not credited as much for it, but a lot of, like you see, like even a lot of artists like who make music in genres like jazz or R&B, things like that. They like grew up in the church,
Mm-hmm.
like they got or they had like some experience in the church, like whether it's the choir or like playing the instrument, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that's essential to the black church, or like the black church experience, I would say. So yeah, the influence is definitely there, and yeah, that's.
What do you think, like, the role of music in African American culture? Did it play a form of, like, resistance to a lot of different things, like, or, like, was it a way of creative expression, or why do you think, like, it played such an important role in
I would say
African American culture?
I would say it did both. It created an outlet for some people, but it also allowed people to, it was an outlet for them to speak their mind, or like say how they really felt about things. A lot of the messages that artists put out are very intentional. So and that's just the best way that they can express it a lot of times. So, but I could say that with any form of art, like as well as like spoken word.
That's true.
Poetry, even like dance, like it's just a way to express yourself.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah, I agree. And what other things what other points you want to bring up? I wanted to ask you before we go even on to that. Like, how about the importance of attending an HBCU for you? Like, has it changed your life in some ways?
Yeah, it definitely changed my life. I would say that I was influenced I knew that I wanted to attend an HBCU after my experiences in high school, just because, like how I mentioned before, growing up it was predominantly black, and then after 7th grade I switched to a different school, and from there on throughout high school it was like I was back to like a minority again, and it was predominantly white.
Now this is more predominantly black again.
Definitely,
yeah.
So I knew I wanted like that experience for myself for college, and because of that, I would say honestly it wasn't exactly what I expected, just because even though it's predominantly black, it's still a very like diverse school as far as like people's backgrounds and experiences, just depending on different things like where they're from and just how they were raised and things like that.
Oh, so, even that, yeah, because the African American community is extremely diverse, right?
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. I went to a black church when I was at St. Paul's College, but it was Episcopal. So I think that's a little different. It seemed like a little more like, seemed more formal than maybe like a Baptist church. So I think like that was probably a little different. But do you feel like how can you talk about some of those differences? Like, I think there's a big variety of differences.
I would say it's a lot of differences. Just like regionally, I would say that's a very big difference. So, for example, like, there's a lot of students that come here that are like from southern states, and there's always that phrase of like southern hospitality, things like that, where like people are like friendly and like they speak to people who they don't know, and things like that, like. And back home, and then in other places like where I hear from people like
No
in the
way,
north and
right?
stuff. Yeah, it's like,
no way.
Yeah, it's like we walk
That's
by
just
people
in general, right? That's
yeah, we
in
just
general.
walk by people and
Right.
like don't speak or like anything
Right.
like that, and it's not disrespectful. It's just like that's just how it is, you know.
It is. That is true.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one thing.
That's a big difference. Like everybody waving at you. Like I was in a small town in Lawrenceville, Virginia. You know, and everybody would wave, and I didn't know who those people were, and they were still waving. I thought that was really strange. It took me a long time because I was really more from the north. But yeah, it's totally different. Does it seem really slow here for you?
Yes, it's definitely. This is a very slow. I would say state in general, honestly, but I haven't been around like that much.
Like DC or something like
yeah,
that.
like compared to DC, it's like this is very slow compared to there.
Right, right.
Yeah, so especially like for people who grew up like in the city and stuff, like coming to Hampton, you realize like this is a lot slower than there. Like,
It is.
Things
It
close
is.
at 9.
That's crazy,
like,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's like it's unheard of. Like back home, like
And
I
even
can
like
talk to-
also even in China, it was when I were there. It's not like that at all. I mean, it's like because there's so many people there.
Yeah.
There's just so many people, so it's like like a tiny little city is like 1 million people there. So I mean, it's like there's always something open or something, you know. But here, like everything closes, like you said, and it seems like, oh, what can you do, right? Yeah.
Definitely, it's like it turns into a ghost town. Like after
Exactly.
After 10.
What do you plan to do? To do later? Like, where do you plan to live later on? And
So, I'm planning to attend law school in fall of 2024, and after that, I'll likely. At first, I was thinking of moving somewhere like California, but now I'm thinking about more like Chicago or like somewhere in the Midwest. I would say like closer to home.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
That sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you have something else that you want to add? Like, is there's something else you want to say?
Are there any like?
Did you talk like about like, well, what do you think about like just like the direction American society is going? Everybody feels like it's going. I mean, I think a lot of people feel like it's going in the wrong direction somehow, or like in some negative type of direction. What do you feel about like the direction that it's going in, and how do you feel also like the Black community has been affected by recent things?
So how I feel that the Black community has been affected by recent things, I would say that around the time like when quarantine first started and there were like that summer after with the Black Lives Matters movements and things like that, I would say that the way that America as a whole kind of responded to that, it seemed like they kind of highlighted Black culture, like kind of went out their way to like do like little things as far as like trying to help us, like give us better opportunities, highlight us more, and
well, then that's positive. Then.
Yeah, so I appreciate
that's something
that.
different.
Yeah,
because I was in China, I didn't know what was going on, but we just saw the police brutality, and then we're all the way from China, and it was like, I mean, the whole world was watching it, and it was really hard to watch. It was like, but I guess like it wasn't always like that everywhere, right? So
well, yeah, I would say, like, don't get me wrong, there was still like a lot of negative things going on, but that response to it, I feel like honestly it kind of like put a band-aid on the situation, but as of recently I feel like things are kind of going back to normal.
How is normal? What do you mean by that?
Normal, we're back to being like how a minority in America is typically treated in society, which is pretty negative.
And that's something like I wasn't even conscious of, like even growing up, like, you know, being Italian American. It wasn't ever really conscious of it, but then when you look at all the Italian American history, it's like it is basically like erase the Italian American experience, you know. So that's similar in a certain sense, like because that's what they did, tried to erase the whatever roots you had, and I just feel like that seems like that's unfortunate. Like, why do you think things haven't progressed as much? I mean, in a lot of ways, the African American experience is an inspiration in a lot of ways all around the world to like civil rights and all of the different things. But why is it like why are we still? And that's why what do you think of the term post-civil rights? I really actually don't like that term because I think it's like I don't like people say post-civil rights, but are we really past the civil rights issues?
Honestly, I don't really think so, but yeah, I would say that we haven't progressed as much because there's still just a lot of people in power who don't necessarily want to change. Or like a lot of people who are still stuck in their ways to where it's like it's hard to change where we can do things like different like grassroots like movements and things like that, but America is still not ran by the same people, but ran by the same ideologies.
Right.
When it comes down to it, as far as the power distribution and just how people in society would be treated.
Do you think there will be a significant change? I mean, we're all hopeful for it, but what do you think?
Honestly, I don't really see that happening anytime soon, unfortunately. I hope so. I feel like a lot of people, especially like in my generation, are kind of trying to change the world, especially like I know the people before us also were, but I feel like now just with different things like technology and like better technology and better like outreach and things like that.
So what do you think?
We have better potential.
You do.
Yeah, I would say that we have better potential than the people before us to actually like enact some change.
What about the people who make the counter argument that say like, oh well, technology is also being used to amplify like racism or things like that, some social media or discrimination of any kind, like but I also kind of saw like I'm thinking of like like the artificial intelligence like ChatGPT and things like that. Maybe will that start getting us to think at like a higher level that like all forms of discrimination are wrong and be more logical and not just be basing things on prejudice or impulse? Do you think that are you positive about that, or how do you feel?
I would say that just like it gives us it gives like African Americans a better platform to like enact change and things like that. It also enacts it also helps those who want to spread negativity. It helps them as well. It's just like you have to like look at both sides of the coin, honestly.
Right. And do you feel like in America it's just going to be that those people are allowed to do that, even though that might cause pain to people, or that right? Like, do you think that there should be more like laws on the book that ensure that the internet isn't being weaponized for to like hurt people in general, like use as a weapon?
I feel like there could be more like laws toward like combating that, but at the same time, like whether it's right or wrong, there are other people who who may believe in some of those negative things, and they see African Americans trying to like do things like that they see as like spreading positivity, but they may view it as something negative. You know what I mean? Like where someone who may be like a white supremacist or something like that, if they see an an African American like posting about like some protests or things like that, they for some reason they can feel offended by it.
Right.
You know? So it's like if you try to put in like a law that can like go against that, I feel like it could also hinder those who are trying to spread a positive message.
It could.
Just because like.
So then that's the kind of paradox of like democracy, right?
Exactly.
Because you've got like you if you allow those people to hurt other people with their speech, then you kind of like, but then it goes back on the other way, like somebody could say the positive message is also hurting them, right?
Exactly.
But I mean, I guess it could be argued in the courtroom, right? Because laws are interpreted. Yeah, I mean, and like I think like going back to appealing to people's common sense, like because like people on a jury, they'd be like trying to figure out on a common sense level, you know, is this person, because sometimes there's maybe pure like malicious motives, like, you know, that are very clear, like it could be pretty transparent, even though the person is trying to hide them, but it's obvious to everyone. You know, maybe that's something where like a jury could decide in terms of that. But that is the thing, I guess, in a certain way, America doesn't have that. So like, but in a lot of other countries, the speech that is allowed in America might not. It would not be allowed. Like, I mean, like in Europe, for example, or something. But there's still like the rise of the far right. What do you think? Like, do you think America will start to embrace diversity more?
I think that there's better potential now for America to start embracing diversity, but I don't think that it'll be something that's embraced fully. Like just because
not soon.
Yeah, not soon. Just because of how people are. Like a lot of people are just stuck in their ways.
Right.
They pass it down generationally.
That's true.
Whether they know it or not.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes they're not even conscious of it. So, I agree.
Yeah. So it would take a lot.
Yeah. Exactly.
Change that.
That's a good point. But do you feel like globally, do you also feel like the world is going to get less tolerant than maybe even, or we're just headed to, or do you feel we're headed towards like a difficult time?
I would say that it could be something like growing pains that happen just because just a lot of African Americans are moving up in the ranks in society.
Yeah,
and things like
which
that.
Is really good.
But with that can come like certain like growing pains that just happen. So it could
That's
be
true.
a negative time that comes, but it's for a greater purpose, like
right.
long term.
And what do you think about like? Do you see yourself? How much do you see yourself as like American, and how much do you see yourself as like a citizen of the world? Do you ever think about it that way? Because like now the world is changing, especially with your generation.
Honestly, I haven't really thought about that too much. I probably should more for sure, but like honestly, I just haven't, and I don't know. I mean, that's part of the problem, honestly, because a lot of people don't really think like that.
No, I noticed that. Yeah. I think it's probably because of my experience abroad, you know.
Yeah,
they forced me to think like that. So, but then it made me really question about America. Like, what is America, you know, also. And you discover some things that you don't like, too, as well. And, like, we're in this country, we're kind of put into a box sometimes. And you think, like, this box is, like, everything. But it's not everything, right? And
not
especially,
even close.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, like, I think your generation you can reach a global audience as opposed to just an American audience if you want to, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think that you can reach out to people all around the world. And then I see like some people writing really negative things about all their experiences in different places and everything. But I feel like on the other hand, like we should try to understand our connections to the rest of the world and build those connections, just like we should build connections in our society too. If you were to talk about the like African American experience and then tie it to like what kind of struggles do you feel like your generation faces that compared to previous generations?
Like a different struggle?
Yeah, like what kind of struggles do you face?
I would say that with technology being so accessible to everyone, and you being able to hear so many more people's like opinions on things, that could be negative. Like that is very negative on the mental. Like,
yeah, that's what I feel like, and it can make it be damaging.
Like a lot of people are like just damaged because of like not even just like cyberbullying, but like just seeing other people's opinion, whereas they might not necessarily be talking about you, but you can just kind of relate to it, and it can like put you down. Like you can see a post from someone who you don't know, but if it's something that you feel like you relate to, then it can damage your self-esteem. Whereas
previous generations
before is like you knew who you interacted with and like maybe like what you read in like a book or like something like that.
Right.
It's like
you didn't have those opportunities at all, right?
Yeah, like you have your like all of us, we have our phone like right here, like in our pocket. So
and our phones kind of bully us too in a way, right?
Exactly, and like
because we look at it and then we're like, oh well, I thought I was good at something, or I thought I could do something, but then
it's so much better. Like,
because there's people all around the world doing different things, and then you feel like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. So, what do you think? Like, how can you combat that? What should you do?
I would say that that's more like on the individual as far as like what they use their phone and like social media for, what they allow themselves to see, because I know sometimes even like I have to take like social media breaks just because a lot of things on social media can just be negative.
Oh, definitely.
So it's like I feel like it's on the individual to like know like what they can kind of like handle and restrict themselves.
I agree. Yeah. So, and not to let your inner world get distorted by the outer world.
Yes, because a lot of it is
virtual world.
A lot of it is fake, honestly.
I agree.
For social media, so
that's really
it's
true.
Like you can, comparison like is just like you do that like unconsciously, like you can just see someone's post, or like if they can have something good going on and you're like, oh man, like I'm just doing terrible, like
exactly.
I need to do more, like
that's true.
So it's like,
and some of them can really talk, so then you're like, and then you're listening to them, but then you feel bad yourself, but you actually don't really know what that person's going through.
You don't know what, you really don't know what someone's going through. So.
Because they're actually not telling the whole story.
Yeah.
Especially like influencers too as well.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that influencers get people to think a certain way about their own identity sometimes?
Oh yeah, for sure. And they like, they do it for the people, but a lot of times they mainly do it for themselves, like to make themselves feel better. Like, and present like a false reality,
right?
To make it seem like make it seem like a lot of people want to like be like them, but in reality, like day to day, it's not like that for them. Their lives aren't really like that.
And then the reality that they might be describing, maybe it's true to some extent, but not all the way true. Yeah. And it could depend on a lot of different things, right? What they chose to show in their videos, and especially with influencers, because they have a specific goal. Yeah, so
it's all intentional, but it can be very negative though.
So that's kind of like the monetary dimension, right?
Yeah,
that's a good point. Okay, so do you want to add anything else, or do you think that's
I think that's pretty good.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Of course.
I really appreciate it.